Our blood consists of four main things: red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and plasma. In this video, we'll take a look at each of them in turn, and then how we can replace blood for those people who don't have enough. Red blood cells are probably the most well known of these, and they make up almost half of our blood by volume. The role of red blood cells, which you might sometimes see written as RBC, is to carry oxygen from the lungs to our body's tissues, so that our cells can use it in cellular respiration. To do this, they contain a red pigment called hemoglobin, which can bind oxygen to become oxyhemoglobin. And then once those red blood cells have travelled around the body to the tissues, the oxyhemoglobin can split back into hemoglobin and oxygen again, so that the oxygen is free to diffuse into our tissues. Now, red blood cells have two adaptations that you need to know about. One is that they don't have a nucleus, which means that there's more space for hemoglobin and oxygen. The second is that they're shaped like a biconcave disc, which gives them a large surface area for absorbing oxygen. White blood cells, meanwhile, make up less than 1% of our blood, but they're an essential part of our immune system, which defends us against infection. There are lots of different types of white blood cells, and they can do a whole range of useful things for us. But three examples of how they defend us against pathogens include phagocytosis, which is basically where a white blood cell will engulf or consume a microorganism, producing antibodies, which can bind onto pathogens and help destroy them, and producing antitoxins, which neutralize any toxins that the pathogens produce. And one last thing to say about white blood cells is that unlike red blood cells, they actually do have a nucleus. In contrast, platelets aren't actually cells, they're just small fragments of cells, and so these definitely don't have a nucleus. What they do is float about in our blood, waiting until we get a cut, at which point they rush to the wound and act like a glue, patching up the hole. And we call this process clotting. As you can imagine, the main reason that we need platelets is to stop blood from pouring out of us whenever we get a cut. However, another important reason is to stop microorganisms from getting in, as they could cause us an infection. Finally, we have plasma, which makes up just over half of the blood's volume. It's a pale straw-coloured liquid, and it's what makes the blood watery so that it can flow. It also carries just about everything, including the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets that we've already seen. In addition, it carries nutrients like glucose and amino acids, waste products like carbon dioxide and urea, as well as hormones, proteins, and the antibodies and antitoxins that were produced by the white blood cells. Now, most adults have about 5 litres of blood flowing through their circulatory system at any one time. However, if this drops too much, for example due to a knife wound or surgical complications, then there might not be enough blood left over to deliver the required oxygen to their tissues. In these cases, doctors can give the patient new blood, and there are two types to know about. Artificial blood is a blood substitute that basically consists of salt water. The main benefit is that it adds volume to our circulatory system, which keeps our vessels full and allows the heart to keep on pumping. The downside, though, is that it doesn't contain any red blood cells, so it doesn't actually allow us to transport any more oxygen, which means that we can only really replace 1/3 of our blood with it. A better option is a blood transfusion, in which a person is given real blood that's been donated by blood donors. This comes with its own red blood cells, which is the key to surviving blood loss.